Our story begins on Coruscant, inside of the Jedi Temple, and inside of the temple, Jedi were moving all throughout the many different hallways, some off to battle meetings, some off to train younglings, and some in meditation chambers. One of these chambers was completely silent, and inside of it, Obi Wan Kenobi knelt alone, eyes closed, hands resting gently on his knees. The scent of these meditation chambers usually brought him peace, as it lingered faintly in the air, but today it was a poor distraction from the ache still clinging to his chest. He tried to breathe through it, tried to let the Force guide him back to peace, but all he could feel was the emotions of loss. Barely a week ago, Obi Wan Kenobi lost Satine. Her final words, her final breath, the helplessness that had twisted inside him as she slipped away. He felt all of it, and he felt the surge of fury that had followed. It had burned in his veins like fire, and for a moment, he'd wanted revenge more than just about anything else. He'd wanted to make Maul suffer, and that terrified him. Obi-Wan was able to stop himself, to throw these emotions away, as he was a Jedi at heart. Nothing could ever change that, but there was a lingering question in his mind regarding all of it. He didn't turn, but he knew now just how far the fear of loss could push a Jedi, especially one who was not raised as a Jedi essentially from birth. Obi-Wan's gaze drifted towards the stained glass window. Somewhere out there, Padme Amidala walked the Senate halls with the same fire, same confidence and beauty that had once drawn Anakin to her. And Obi-Wan knew the truth about Anakin and Padme. He'd always known, since their mission together that led to Geonosis, but he and Anakin did not talk about it. He couldn't, as Obi-Wan knew that Padme was the only person, the only thing that truly made Anakin happy. The two of them were like brothers, Ahsoka like his sister, the Jedi like a family, the clones were great friends, but at the end of the day, it was all about Padme. He turned a blind eye, hoping it would soon fade, but now in the aftermath of Satine's death, Obi-Wan couldn't pretend anymore. He'd seen what love could do when threatened, how easily it could break a Jedi, and Anakin was already breaking during the war. Obi-Wan soon rose from his knees, a quiet resolve settling over him. He could no longer allow this to continue. He could not let Padme's fate be so closely tied to Anakin's fate, should it ever come to that. And later that day, still on Coruscant, Anakin Skywalker would step out of his speeder and walk onto the balcony of Padme's apartment. There was nowhere in the galaxy he would rather be. He called out for Padme, expecting to hear her usual cheerful voice at his arrival, or perhaps to be greeted by 3PO, but what greeted him instead stopped him cold. Obi-Wan stood just inside the home, hands in front of him. Anakin couldn't quite read his expression, but he could tell that his former master was quite calm about whatever brought him to here today. Anakin composed himself, preparing to make up a reason as to why he was here at Padme's apartment. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Obi-Wan stepped aside and gestured for Anakin to enter. The apartment felt hollow. Padme was gone. Whether she'd left by choice or request, it didn't matter. This was not a coincidence. Obi-Wan had come here for a reason, and Anakin could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. He entered slowly, each step deliberate, as if trying to hold back the coming conversation. Obi-Wan didn't waste any time. He told Anakin that he knows the truth, and he had for a long time. Now, Obi-Wan, in this moment, only knew that Anakin and Padme were seeing each other often. He didn't actually know they were completely married, but he saw the way Anakin looked at her, spoke to her, rushed to her side whenever needed. Anakin, trying to hold on to the lie, said he doesn't know what Obi-Wan is talking about, and Obi-Wan shifted the subject. For the first time with Anakin, he spoke of Satine, not just her death, but what it had almost done to him. He admitted what Anakin never expected to hear from his old master, that he'd come closer to falling to the dark side than ever, that when Satine died in his arms, and Maul stood gloating before him, the darkness whispered to him in a way it never did in battle. He'd wanted revenge, and for a moment, he nearly gave into it. It had taken everything he had to step back from that edge. And now, as he looked at Anakin, he could see that same storm potentially building, the same dangerous potential, but with even deeper roots. Obi-Wan told him that love, as beautiful as it was, had become a threat during this war. Anakin didn't argue right away. He stood still, and he said it wasn't the same. He said that Padme was the only thing in the galaxy that made sense, that gave him something to fight for. Without her, he wouldn't have made it through half the war. But Obi-Wan only listened, expressions softening in a way that hurt even more. This wasn't about lectures or discipline, it was all about fear, and Obi-Wan wasn't going to be changing his mind. So, he laid out the choice to Anakin. Either Anakin come forward and tell the council the truth, or he end this relationship, end the deception, end the attachment. Anakin stared at the floor, the light from the window casting long shadows across his face, and Obi-Wan didn't bother lingering for much longer. He gave Anakin one final look, and quietly left the apartment, leaving the door open behind him. Anakin felt betrayed by his friend, and the choice lingered in his mind. Anakin wasn't sure how long it was until the door to the apartment slid back open with a soft hiss, and Padme would step inside. The sun of Coruscant had fully set, leaving only the glow of Coruscant city lights flickering against the windows. She found Anakin where she expected him, sitting alone on the edge of the couch, shoulders slumped, eyes locked on the floor. He didn't look up when she entered. He didn't need to. He could feel her just as he always did. But there was no comfort in it now, just a cold silence that wrapped around them both. Padme closed the door behind her, standing for a long moment before crossing the room. She sat beside him, and she told him that she had spoken to Obi Wan earlier, that he came to her before she came to Anakin. She said he wasn't cruel, he was just honest. He told her about Satine, about what he felt when she died, about how quickly love could become fear, and how that could twist into something dark. She didn't want to believe it. She wanted to tell him that their love was different, that Anakin could never let himself fall. But as she watched him now, she realized how deeply this was already eating at him. She placed her hand gently over his, and when he finally looked at her, his eyes were filled with a quiet kind of desperation. It was like a plea for them to hold on. But Padme just said that they discussed this on Naboo before the war. They both knew a relationship like this could tear them apart. She told him that she loved him more than anything, that what they had was real, beautiful, and something she would always carry in her heart. But they had to end it. She would wait for him after the war. When it ends, when peace returns, they can find a way to live openly. Anakin was angry. He was sad, numb. He would cross the apartment slowly, and soon he would leave, pausing at the door, hoping she might call to him, but the silence remained. So he stepped into the corridor, walked down to his speeder, and climbed in. The moment the cockpit closed around him, he felt that emptiness, the weight of everything. He couldn't go back to the temple. Obi Wan was there. He couldn't go back to the apartment. He needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who wouldn't just ask him to let go of everything. So he flew to the one place that still made him feel like he mattered, the office of Chancellor Palpatine. After Anakin entered, it would not be long until Palpatine asked what was troubling him, though the answer was already written across Anakin's face. Anakin always enjoyed his time with Palpatine. The man always seemed to know when something was off. Anakin confessed the truth, first telling Palpatine that he and Padme were together. Palpatine faked a look of surprise, and Anakin said now that he and Padme were separated, that the Jedi pushed him to abandon her in the name of peace and duty. He admitted he didn't feel like himself anymore. Jedi teachings felt hollow and incomplete. Palpatine listened with interruption, never judging or lecturing, as always. His voice was soft when he eventually did speak, like the sound of a fire that was slowly growing. He told Anakin that love was not a weakness, but a strength, and the Jedi always feared emotion because they don't understand it. In trying to suppress their attachments, they cut themselves off from the most powerful forces in the galaxy, and Anakin is right to try and embrace it. It's what makes him special. And the Chancellor turned the conversation over to the war. He said that as long as the galaxy is in chaos, people like Padme will always be in danger. As long as people like Dooku live and the Separatists have power, peace will remain out of reach. He suggested that Anakin is the key to ending the war, and perhaps it's time that he do it through decisive action. The Jedi, Palpatine said, will never be bold enough to do what is necessary. They will let the war drag on, allow more lives to be lost, all in the name of a dying code. But Anakin was different, stronger, capable of doing what others could not. Anakin asked Palpatine what he should do, and the Chancellor smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. He didn't give any orders, he just told Anakin that sometimes peace requires sacrifice. Sometimes one man has to carry the burden others were too afraid to lift. Anakin nodded, understanding, and soon he would leave the office with his thoughts no longer nearly as cloudy. By the time he reached his speeder, he knew that Dooku was the shadow that kept the galaxy in chains, and if removing him is the only way to bring peace, then so be it. Anakin didn't see any darkness in that choice. He saw clarity and a better future. If he could find Dooku and finally end him, then he can have the life he wants. And in his office, Palpatine was pleased. Once again, the Jedi were just giving him the keys to slowly turn Anakin. His new obsession with ending the war will consume him until he has no choice but to find the dark side of the Force. The weeks that followed moved like a blur, and Anakin felt none of it. Not the battle reports, not the council briefings, not even the subtle glances from Ahsoka as she waited for the warmth to return. He was like a machine. Of course, he fought in battles when needed, but every night, when on Coruscant, he returned to a private workshop buried deep within the Coruscant underworld, a place not even Obi Wan knew was used. And there, under dim light, he would pour himself into a project of desperation and purpose, as he had a separatist recon droid, stripped of its original programming, and slowly rebuilt with a new, simple directive to find Count Dooku. This process would be slow and difficult. Anakin was adjusting everything within the droid's mind, and when it was complete, he would load it into a stealth transport and letting it go after a battle above Megiddo, where the droid would find its way with the separatist fleet, and eventually back with the defense fleet around Sereno. From there, the droid became a ghost in the system, tapping into comms, silently recording patterns, sending back encrypted bursts of data to a receiver Anakin had hidden in his quarters. Every spare moment between battles, he was reviewing these signals and building a picture of where Dooku could be. While others were focused on the war, Anakin watched Dooku's patterns, and it took around 6 weeks, but the moment would finally come along. The droid caught a signal of Dooku leaving Sereno aboard his personal solar sailor. The droid moved without command, as programmed, crawling onto the underside of the ship and putting the tracker there. Dooku would leave Sereno, and Anakin would know exactly where he was going. In those long 6 weeks, he'd barely spoken to Ahsoka. He trained her when expected, but the sessions were quiet and detached. The clones would notice this, and Obi Wan did as well, but no one was pressing him yet. They chalked it up to the war's toll, to grief and exhaustion. Anakin let them believe whatever they needed. In truth, he wasn't tired. He was completely alive, because now, at last, he had a lead. And when he would find Dooku, the war could finally end. Padme could be with him again. But as Anakin was preparing to secretly leave, Ahsoka and Obi Wan would find him and ask what was going on. Anakin decided it was probably better not to lie, so he told the truth. He was off to fight and hopefully destroy Dooku. And he told Obi Wan and Ahsoka they can go tell the council, but he will already be gone, or they can come with him. The decision would be made quickly, so Anakin, Obi Wan, and Ahsoka would get into a Republic shuttle that Anakin was taking. The tracker was leading them to Stigion Prime, and upon arriving to this planet, the three Jedi would see the jagged peaks and endless tundra, giving way to a spire, an ancient prison reactivated during the war for the most dangerous of separatist enemies. Anakin stood at the viewport of the ship, analyzing this spire. The trio knew the mission was dangerous, but they didn't yet understand just how deep the darkness could run here. They discussed their plan and approached quickly. They would breach quietly and attempt to capture Dooku alive, but something in Anakin's tone suggested he didn't believe in capture anymore. Obi-Wan noticed this, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. He trusted Anakin to do what was right when the time does come. But as the Jedi trio approached from far beyond the jagged cliffs, Count Dooku stood inside as he looked upon his master, Darth Sidious. The Dark Lord had come here to oversee a matter of great importance. 6 weeks ago, Darth Maul was captured on Mandalore, and he was left in isolation here until now. The two Sith would be trying to break him, to find out where his Shadow Collective was. Grievous was here as well, stalking the perimeter of the spire, restless. He was here to ensure no one comes to rescue Maul. The spire had become a hidden sanctuary, where Sidious could confront the growing instability in the galaxy and in his movements. Outside the spire, the icy cold winds of Stigion Prime whipped across the rocky cliffs as Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka descended through the stormy skies by foot. They were climbing the rocks and trying their best not to slip, as Obi-Wan remarked that they should have alerted the council. Anakin joked that this is much more fun, and Ahsoka could only shake her head. The spire in front of them was like a towering blade of obsidian, and as they closed in, something caught Ahsoka's eye. It was a glint of red and black at the peak of the structure. Mandalorians! She gasped and called up to the other two, saying what she saw. Their armor had jagged horns and crimson markings, unmistakably aligned with Maul. Obi-Wan's stomach twisted. He felt unease from the moment they neared the surface, but now that feeling dropped into dread. This would be no simple capture. Maul was here. The trio swung low and banked hard towards a narrow ridge cut into the spire's side. There was a hidden hangar exposed only by a blinking blue light. They would take turns diving into the hangar, where they threw battle droids off of the cliff, only to suddenly find a Republic shuttle sitting inside the hangar's far end. Anakin approached it in disbelief. This was not just any shuttle. This was the Chancellor's. Anakin's mind raced. If Palpatine was here, then perhaps he was lured into a trap by Dooku. Anakin said they have to hurry. Palpatine could be in danger, and Obi-Wan only felt this get more and more dangerous. He said perhaps they need to turn back, but Anakin had already taken off. Obi-Wan chased him through the halls, and then at the end of the staircase, the Force pulsed with pure darkness. The chamber below flickered with red energy. They emerged into a vault, lit only by lightning, as Dooku and Sidious stood over a figure chained to a steel frame. Maul. His body convulsed under arcs of Force lightning, as the Sith Lords poured power into him, demanding to know more information about Maul's Shadow Collective. His screams bounced off the walls, more rage than pain, as he was refusing to talk. Anakin surged forward instinctively, but Obi-Wan threw an arm in front of him. This was a death trap. Obi-Wan ordered Ahsoka to fall back. Get the ship ready. If this goes wrong, and it most likely would, they will need a fast escape. Ahsoka hesitated, but obeyed, when Anakin gave her a serious nod, and she vanished back through the passageway. That's when the explosion came from within the spire itself. Maul's restraints burst outward in a blast of dark energy, as Mandalorians dropped through the ceiling on grappling lines, blasters raining down across the chamber. Bolts flew all over the place, some at Grievous, who leapt to intercept them with spinning blades, some at Dooku and Sidious, whose concentration was shattered. The Sith spun to defend themselves, just as Anakin and Obi-Wan ignited their blades. This was chaos, and the two of them thrived in chaos. In the cell, Grievous barreled into the Mandalorians, shredding one of them with a lunge of all four sabers, but the others countered with flamethrowers, forcing Grievous to retreat into a brutal duel through the side corridors, as three Mandalorians fired at him again and again. Another freed Maul as he was dropped to his knees, twitching, but alive, eyes burning with hate. And Maul ignited the Darksaber before slashing a path through anyone in his way, vanishing into the storm, preparing to make his escape. Anakin and Obi Wan launched back into battle, lightsabers clashing against the two red blades of the Sith. Dooku moved with his elegant style, pushing Anakin backward, while laughing at his timely arrival. Sidious struck with venom, fast, dark energy bleeding from his every movement. He had an opening to kill Kenobi, but the Mandalorians kept firing, their chaotic presence keeping the Sith distracted just enough. One bolt nearly struck Anakin in the head, and it was only Obi-Wan's quick shove that saved him. The room was a blur. Force bursts, saber trails, explosions ripping through the support columns. The spire shook with every impact, and Maul decided it was time to turn back. This was his best chance to eliminate all of his enemies. As Grievous battled the Mandalorians, cutting down two of them, the Darksaber would suddenly pierce his back as Maul ripped the cyborg general into pieces. One down. But meanwhile, in the hangar, Ahsoka was about to get out of here and get the ship when her eyes landed on a stack of explosive fuel canisters. Unstable, but just light enough to lift. She loaded them into Palpatine's shuttle with the Force, sealing the hatch, and she flew upwards into the white clouds. The spire shrank below her as she rose through the mist until reaching the summit. Everything below was spiraling into a storm of battle. She knew Anakin and Obi-Wan didn't have any friends in that spire. She also knew her next move was extremely reckless, but her master was Anakin. There was simply no other way. This was what she knew. She hovered, then flipped the shuttle's underbay, and released the canisters directly onto the base of the spire. They landed almost too perfectly. A chain reaction erupted through the structure, fire and thunder tearing through the tower, and below, Anakin and Obi-Wan felt it instantly as they were thrown to the floor. Dooku and Sidious were thrown across the room by the explosions. The entire building was in danger of collapse. The floor groaned and gave way, stone and steel crumbling into the jagged abyss below. They looked at each other. They knew it was her. Anakin smiled, and Obi-Wan just shook his head. It was all he knew to do. Without hesitation, the two of them sprinted toward the open area that the Mandalorians created to free Maul, and the two of them just leapt out into the open air, into the roaring wind, trusting the Force and trusting the Padawan. At first, it seemed like a horrible mistake. They were falling away with no help in sight, but then the shuttle dove through the smoke, catching them at the last second. Ramp open, Ahsoka's hand outstretched. She pulled them inside just in time. Beside them, the entire spire would fold inward, collapsing as the snow surrounding it formed an avalanche to help push the spire off the cliff. It would fall into the abyss below as flames burst from within. There was no escape for anyone inside. No rescue for Dooku, Sidious, Grievous, Maul, the Mandalorians all gone, consumed by fire and ruin. The shuttle with the Jedi rose into the sky, leaving behind only silence as they all came to grips with what happened here. For the first time since arriving, they had a moment to think, and they realized that Palpatine had to be Sidious. He was gone, Dooku gone, Grievous gone. The war, it could finally come to an end. And the war would end much more quietly than anyone ever had expected. When word spread that Count Dooku, Grievous, and Palpatine all died in the collapse of the spire on Stigion Prime, the galaxy paused. The Jedi Council was upset for a bit at this unapproved mission, but as always, the trio of Jedi brought results. Investigations uncovered secret evidence that linked Dooku and Palpatine together from the beginning. Over time, the Jedi Order would change. They returned to the roots of what they were meant to be, guardians of peace. Some Jedi slipped away entirely, choosing new, quiet lives on faraway worlds to reflect and heal after the war. The Republic would form a new Senate, smaller, much more accountable, with leaders drawn from both the core and outer systems. Padme was one of the first to speak before it, urging new compassion, new unity together. Ahsoka remained close to Anakin, who'd stepped back from the spotlight, but was still committed to helping rebuild. The fire that once burned inside of him was beginning to quiet. He was still powerful, but now he carried more peace in his heart. One day later on, Obi-Wan stood beside Anakin on a temple balcony. He would promise to keep the secret of Anakin and Padme. Their bond was whole again, and Anakin felt genuine happiness for the first time in a long time. Padme would stand beside him that night as they looked to a future of a galaxy that they helped to make better. And folks, that is our story today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I don't want to say it was fun. It was a good one to write. I really enjoyed the aspect of bringing on the Stigion Prime prison cell that was used in the Son of Dathomir comic run that was originally going to be a Clone Wars arc, but turned into a comic run. I thought it was a good place to just kind of have this be like a chaotic Clone Wars episode with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka, because, you know, the three of them are always getting into just chaos and somehow being the only ones to survive it. So I thought let's integrate that and let's involve all of the enemies. Dooku, Sidious, Grievous, Maul, some Mandalorians, and it helps kind of wrap up Obi-Wan's story, along with Anakin's in my mind. So yeah, I mean, Sidious kind of walks himself into a trap here by playing Anakin being like, you gotta kill Dooku, and he tracks Dooku to the place where Sidious also is. Yeah, I had fun writing that. I think it makes some sense in a fun way. So, you know, obviously it's a little out there, but that's the whole point. So appreciate you guys. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you want to see next. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.